What do you think about the Trump tariffs?
Doesn't affect me.
That guy makes an excellent point we're going to get to a little bit later after we watch some more clips. Welcome to another edition of Spark the Conversation. This is your host, Mark the Spark, and we're going to cover tariffs today in the news. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, share with a friend. Let's go. So, of course, by now you've probably heard that Donald Trump announced tariffs that he's going to be instituting across the world. Every country, he says there'll be no exemptions. So he's starting with a 10% baseline tariff on all countries. This is basically, from my perspective, a negotiating tactic to make sure that there's no favoritism called out or anything like that. Although there is going to be further tariffs for countries that have been manipulating their currency, ones who have some trade discrepancies with the United States. And this is not just trade differential. And I think this key, I know Ben Shapiro, who I listen to daily, has been really harping on this trade differential. And I agree with him that trade differential is not necessarily a negative to start with. But I disagree that this is the only thing that's being calculated here. There is a lot of different ways. There are a lot of different ways that, a difference in trade can be manipulated to hurt the United States. And I also disagree, or I agree with Donald Trump. Ben Shapiro really hasn't addressed this too much, but I agree that the United States has been taken advantage of for a long time, and that no administration up till this point has really been willing to address it. So this first clip is Donald Trump announcing the tariffs. He's got his little bulletin board thing that he's got all the countries laid out with the percentages of the tariff that the United States is going to be instituting against these countries, the trade coming into our country.
So if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything, but now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff. Taiwan, where they took all of our computer chips and semiconductors. We used to be the king, right? We were everything. We had all of it. Now we have almost none of it, except the biggest company is coming in. We're going to end up with almost 40%. Lee Zeldin's working to get their approvals. And it's an amazing company. Mr. Wei, of one of the great companies of the world, actually. They're coming in from Taiwan, and they're going to build one of the biggest plants in the world, maybe the biggest for that. But 64%, we're going to charge them 32%. Japan, very, very tough, great people. And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat right in that Oval Office, right over there, right behind the Resolute desk or whichever desk they chose. Japan, 46%. They would charge us 46%, and much higher for certain items like cars, little items like cars. 46%, we're charging them 24%. India, very, very tough, very, very tough. The Prime Minister just left, and he's a great friend of mine, but I said, you're a friend of mine, but you're not treating us right. They charge us 52%.
So he points out the different rates that we're going to be charging to different countries. And by doing, charging different rates, tariffs to different countries, it shows that there's been a ton of thought and research that have gone into this to determine the differentials that uh, we faced in trade, in monetary manipulation, in any other kind of economic disparity that's between our country and these other countries. And the United States has been the world's currency. The dollar of the US has been the world's currency for quite a long time, and we do not want that to change, and that is key. One thing that is going to protect that is by taking control of the federal debt. I mean, it has been out of control for a long time, and there really is no incentive structure. I've talked about this before, that there's no incentive structure to reduce the deficit and reduce the federal debt level in this country. And in reality, the only way that we've ever seen that it would be possible to reduce is by reducing the amount of these, handouts that are given. Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. These are some of the biggest budget items that we face. The federal interest rate also, but there's nothing you could do about that until you pay the debt off. And the final straw, the bigger key item, is the military and defense of our country, which we clearly do not want to make cuts there. In fact, we want to make increases there because when you're the world power, everybody has a target on your back. All right. So these are all key things to do. So maybe this is Donald Trump's plan. If he can bring back enough business to America, if he can create enough economic drive from corporations and from actually making things, which, the United States has become such a service-driven industry, which does not create wealth. It just passes wealth around from one person to another, that we really need to do something to turn it back to the country that it used to be, one that builds things and makes things and sells it to everybody else. And they can be the service-driven economies of the world. But we need to maintain that strength, and we need to be able to pay off our debt. And if we can drive enough economic growth in this country, maybe it's possible. None of the experts see it, but we don't trust the experts anymore, do we? Donald Trump has a plan. He has a vision. We just got to trust him and hope it works and know that he can correct it basically with the snap of his fingers if it goes too far in the wrong direction. So here's him talking about the tariff differentials with auto manufacturers from other countries.
And we take their cars, Mercedes, Volkswagen, BMW. We take their millions of cars. They take no cars. They don't take our farm product. They don't take anything. Europe's treated us very badly. We put a big tariff on Europe. They are coming to the table. They want to talk. But there's no talk unless they pay us a lot of money on a yearly basis. Number one for present, but also for past, because they've taken a lot of our wealth away, and we're not going to allow it to happen.
Sir, have you talked to...
So he's talking a lot about the differentials with Europe, how Europe has treated the United States, and it really is a disgrace because we have treated them so well. We've come to their defense. I mean, NATO, look at the differential in spending towards NATO. Until Donald Trump, his last term, where he really pushed his finger on the scale and told these countries that they needed to pay their fair share, until that happened, they really were underpaying for basically their security. I mean, when has NATO come to the United States aid? I couldn't tell you a time, and I don't think it's happened. So it's really for the Europeans' defense, and we're the ones spending more than they are on the defense. Not right. And so that's just one example, not really trade related, but it is financially related. And it's an example of how poorly they've treated us. And plus, there's always this underlying piece. And this is something that nobody really talks about, that all these countries had a low-key distaste for the United States. And, their citizens have always kind of looked down upon the citizens of the U.S., and that's not right either, because those are our tax dollars that are going to fund major parts of their defense through NATO. So it just is kind of a, backhanded slap. But on Jake Tapper on CNN, one of the biggest lamestream news agencies. He was talking about how the auto industry kind of scored a win here. And it is interesting turnabout to see the auto industry, the unions, the auto workers union is a huge union in the United States, coming to the support of Donald Trump in these tariffs.
President Trump argues that these tariffs are needed to bring American manufacturing back and to help American workers left behind in places like Minnesota. He has support from the UAW. The UAW called his auto tariffs, quote, a long overdue shift away from a harmful economic framework that has devastated the working class. It signals a return to policies that prioritize the workers who build this country rather than the greed of ruthless corporations, unquote.
So interesting to see Tim Walz' face. He's still alive. He does exist. But we weren't going to stick around to listen to what he had to say because we ain't got time for that. But interesting turnabout, like I said, to see the auto workers unions in support of Donald Trump. And, you know, it goes to something that we'll cover a little bit later. And it kind of goes to the initial clip that we opened with a little bit, where I think the common man really is unaffected by this whole thing. And that's kind of the key. This is the whole flip-flop of what Donald Trump is doing. In a lot of his policies, he's really, you know, fairly liberal and kind of leaning to the left in some of his actions. And if you look not even far, you know, that far, we could see Bernie Sanders supporting actions like this, President Obama supporting actions like this, using tariffs to try to gain wealth and gain things for our country. So it really isn't a new idea. It's just new to be doing it all at once. So there was some talk earlier today about a potential for a 90-day pause in the tariffs. And I think that probably came from, there were some business owners, pretty wealthy CEOs that were talking about, you know, asking for a 90-day pause. And I think maybe that got turned into some rumor that there was actually going to be one. But Carolyn Leavitt and some others in the administration came out quickly and said that that was not going to happen.
Spoke to Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, on the phone just a short time ago, and she tells me it is, quote unquote, fake news that the White House is considering a 90-day pause. So the White House pouring cold water on this idea, wherever it came from, that they are considering a 90-day pause on tariffs, saying that the president is committed to his tariff regime, and any reports that he's considering a 90-day pause are, quote, fake news. That from the White House press secretary on the record just a short time ago to me on the cell phone here as we try to sort through where this came from and why it is that the market became convinced that might be a possibility. The White House saying it is not a possibility, Carl.
So clearly that was a rumor that was flying around. It seemed really like that was a request. I think Bill Ackman was one of those that had requested that and was warning of a possible recession. You know, these are business owners and they are smart. They know how to make money in business, but do they know how to manipulate? I mean, that's really what is being done in a negotiation of this type. Do they know how to manipulate other countries into, coming to the table to make fair trade deals? It's going to be interesting to see if Trump does know that. I think that he at least has some historical success in doing this, so we have to give him some leeway there. Now, here is Kevin Hassett, the National Economic Council director, who was also mimicking the fact that there was going to be no 90-day pause in this institution of the tariffs.
Will you do a 90-day pause? Would you consider that?
Or Bill, yeah, you know, I think that the president is going to decide what the president's going to decide. There are more than 50 countries in negotiation with the president. We've got the prime minister of Israel coming today. We've had a reach out overnight from Taiwan. And but I would urge everyone, especially Bill, to ease off the rhetoric a little bit. The fact is that say 10% baseline tariff is on 14% of GDP. That's about how much trade we have, how many imports. And so 86% of GDP is affected by the deregulation and the tax cuts and everything else. And even if you think, and I think a lot of us at the White House think that these economic responses are exaggerated by critics, even if you think that there will be some negative effect from the trade side, that's still a small share of GDP. And so the idea that it's going to be a nuclear winter or something like that is completely irresponsible rhetoric.
So interesting that he points out how many countries have reached out to the United States already to make trade deals, to negotiate these percentages down, which I think was the mission of this. Now, Donald Trump has kept it pretty close to the chest on whether he is willing to negotiate on these numbers or not. He really has held a pretty strong line, even in countries that are close allies with the United States, to whether he will negotiate or not. He already kind of made an inclination, or an indication, I should say, that he would, because when you looked at him showing that chart initially, he was showing that, these are the percentages they're tariffing us, or, if you include all these different factors, and we're only going to do half of that. So he's already making us seem like we're being merciful and lenient towards these countries, which is an indication of, the fact that we're willing to go further, obviously. And I think that has to be. I mean, tariffs with no end is pointless. It really is. And I think Donald Trump knows that. I think they all know that. But he is the master negotiator. He is showing you how to make the art of the deal. Okay? He cannot give away his ultimate plan. And this is what is sending the markets scrambling. But ultimately, anybody who plays the markets and sticks with it will end up better than they were to start. And if you keep buying like you should, if you're not towards the end of your, ready to retire and live off of those funds, you will be buying all along and you will end up ahead quite a bit from doing so. But anyways, he's the master negotiator. If he tells you what his plan is, he loses the negotiation. And this is key. He said this about battle plans in the past. He's called some of these Democrats dumb for, telling what their plans are going to be. Obama being one of them. Biden, of course, because he couldn't keep a secret. He really didn't know the plan to begin with. But he would, tell everybody what their plan was, or what their line in the sand was, so that the other countries would know exactly what the play was going to be. Donald Trump is not going to do that. And that is what's sending, like I said, the markets reeling, making investors uncomfortable, making some businesses uncomfortable, but it is the art of the deal. So, but what he was talking about was the fact that Kevin Hassett was talking about was the fact that 50 countries have reached out to the United States. And now there's clips now where they're saying that 70 countries have reached out to the United States to make deals with them. Here is, I believe this is Keir Starmer from the UK, who was talking about reaching out and being willing to make a deal with the United States.
We stand ready to negotiate with the United States. Indeed, we have offered 0 for 0 tariffs for industrial goods, as we have successfully done with many other trading partners, because Europe is always ready for a good deal, so we keep it on the table. But we are also prepared to respond through countermeasures and defend our interests.
I stand corrected. That is the European Union's Ursula von der Leyen, I think that's how you say it. She is actually, turns around at the end though, saying, we'll retaliate if we're not going to make a deal. So kind of throwing that out there. I don't know. I just don't. To me, the question is, this is the major question, and this has been asked by others, but it really hasn't been answered. If the tariffs are so bad, why are the other countries tariffing equally or more, right? Because the word is, right, this is what they keep saying, that tariffs are a tax on your own people, okay? So they say, don't raise tariffs because it's a tax on your own people. But then they say, but if you raise them, then we're going to raise them. So don't raise them because they're taxing your people. But if you raise them and tax your own people, then we're going to raise them and tax our own people. It's like, well, don't cut off your hand because if you cut off your hand, we're going to cut off our hand. Like, what? Don't threaten me with a good time. I just don't understand the logic behind it. Okay. It just doesn't make sense. If it was so bad and you were going to tax your own people, why wouldn't you just flood the other person's market with cheap goods? I don't know. Or just flood your own, keep it for yourself and make it cheaper for yourself, for your own people. I don't think it's that simple to just say it one way or the other, but they're trying to oversimplify it. Donald Trump understands the complexity of it all, I do believe, and he has good advisors. This was a key factor in getting the cabinet together that he wanted, and this is why we were so adamant about it, was because getting those key people in the room to advise Donald Trump is going to be, really critical in, getting through these complex issues of world negotiation with other countries. And, even, Ben Shapiro again has pointed out that he's not sure that people are telling Donald Trump what he needs to hear, the bad news. And I don't think that Trump relies on his advisors just to tell him the bad news. He clearly is well read. He pays attention to a lot of different news sources. He's quite a connected guy. However, Elon Musk has his ear, okay? Elon Musk sees the commercial side of all of this, and I do not think that he would be afraid to, get Donald Trump's attention and say, whoa, we got to slam on the brakes. Do you know what you're doing here? I think that we need to make this change or that change. So the word is getting there. I don't think that's going to be an issue. And I don't think people are going to be afraid to tell Donald Trump what he needs to hear if it's bad news or otherwise. So those are all key. So he met with Netanyahu today out of Israel, and there was also some negotiation there. Israel was actually one of the first countries to come to the table and say they were going to drop all tariffs against the United States, which is interesting to even think that they would have any. But this seems like a common practice. Again, if they were so bad, why would you do that to your own people? Okay? Ultimately, I think what we need to get to, and I do agree with Ben Shapiro on this, and others have said this as well, the ultimate goal needs to be zero tariffs between countries, complete free trade. And even if you do that for a majority of the world, places like China that is trying to tariff, they will be the odd man out, and they will be the one that everybody turns against, and they will be the ones that suffer the most, especially with their weak economy, where they really do not have the economy that they claim to have. So this is the meeting, a comment that Donald Trump made about tariffs with Netanyahu over.
Do you plan to reduce the tariffs that your government put on Israeli goods, 17%?
On where?
On Israeli goods, the 17%. Do you plan
Well,
to
we're
reduce
talking
it?
about a whole new trade. Maybe not. Maybe not. Don't forget, we help Israel a lot. We give Israel $4 billion a year. That's a lot. Congratulations, by the way. That's pretty good. But we give Israel billions of dollars a year. Billions. It's one of the highest of, and we give a lot of countries money. You wouldn't believe if I said we give Afghanistan a lot of money, do you? Because that was a Biden deal, another Biden deal. Not only did he embarrass us with that, but they give them billions of dollars, Afghanistan, right? So, but no, we take good care of our friends, and we don't take care of our enemies. We're not taking care of our enemies anymore, but we do take care of our friends.
And it's important to note how gracious Donald Trump is when he calls out other countries and points out different factors, of why he's charging tariffs and the other tariffs, other countries' tariffs against the U.S. He keeps saying, congratulations, good job. You're smart to do it, right? He's not saying tariffs are good for us, but bad for you. He's saying tariffs were good for you for a long time. Now they're going to be good for us. Okay. And you kind of got to take both sides of that. You can't say, like the left keeps trying to push, and say tariffs were good for these guys, but they're bad because we're doing it. That's not how it works. Okay? You have to take one side or the other. That is a leftist argument. That is a leftist way of speaking, to say it was good for them and it was bad for us. You either have to say it was bad for them and prove it, and now it's bad for us, or you have to say it was good for them and prove it, and now it's going to be good for us. And I think the fact that they've kept these in place for a long time proves that it's good, or else why would they keep doing that if it was really hurting their people? So, they're playing both sides of the argument here. I think you got to stick to one or the other. Now, Senator John Barrasso talks about how these tariffs are actually not only, so we saw how it was going to help the auto industry. The unions have come out in support of that, but it's also going to help the agricultural industry. We've heard about the taxes that Canada charges on agricultural products from the United States that go into Canada. We're also going to hear about Vietnam, Australia, and some others in this little clip here, and see how it's going to help benefit that industry in the U.S. as well.
For the last 90 years, Congress has given the president more and more authority on tariffs, specifically national security, for unfair trade practices. President Trump is fully within his authority. And I appreciate what the president is doing on tariffs, specifically in our home state of Wyoming. And in terms of beef, the cattle producers, they're saying it is about time. Yeah. One of the countries that you just showed on that slip before I came on, Australia. Australia has sold $29 billion worth of beef in the United States, and we haven't been able to sell one hamburger in Australia because of barriers. They showed Thailand, 30% tariffs on beef coming from the United States. Vietnam, 50%. You look at these numbers, and the ranchers of Wyoming are saying, thank you, Mr. President, it is about time.
So another angle that you might not have heard coming from Wyoming, which is, obviously a big agricultural state in the country, but a different perspective. And I think it is key to hear these different perspectives when you're going through the news, because if you stay on one channel, listen to one person, you're going to be stuck with a very narrow focused vision of what's going on in the world. And I think it's a lot more complicated than that. So Kevin O'Leary has actually been somebody in business, an entrepreneur, very successful businessman who has taken kind of different stances than the rest of people that you would expect, especially in big business. And he goes on to explain on Yahoo Finance the details about how these tariffs could work. And I think he's a little more nuanced on this. Now, this is a long clip, so I'm going to try, I think it's 10 minutes, but I'm going to try to clip it down, hit some of the major points for you, and then we'll go through it.
I want to start on these tariffs. The market is on track right now for its worst weekly performance since March of 2020. How do you continue to be an advocate for these tariffs, given the sell-off we're seeing, given that I have had every source on our show this morning say that these tariffs will be causing a recession in the United States?
They don't know that yet. They don't know how long the tariff's going to be on. We've never done this before. We've never taken on the entire globe. Usually it's done in trade agreements with specific countries, such as NAFTA, which was Canada and Mexico, or European Union situation. This is unique, over 60 countries. The more complex aspect of these negotiations are around the idea of trade imbalances. And so when you put on tariffs to try and fix trade imbalance, it's difficult because the largest economy on earth is the United States. So really, you're starting a behemoth negotiation. And so you can assume that behind the scenes are two spheres of negotiations. One is, let's try and reduce the imbalance of trade by buying more stuff from the United States. That's one signal. And the other, which is very easy to fix, is simply remove all tariffs. If you're going to have reciprocal tariffs at 20%, 30%, 40%, just get rid of them, bring them down to zero. And this is about leveling the playing field on a wide range of issues, including IP law, access to business, access to courts, being compliant with U.S. regulations on securities. There is a laundry list of grievances with China that have been around since they joined the WTO. By the way, markets correct every 18 months up to 20%. You're watching it happen right now. It's not pleasant. You can't blame just the tariffs for this. These have been very expensive markets now for almost 18 months. Now they're having a correction. I think what matters is this a recession signal, yes or no? And How long will these tariffs be on? I would say 50% of these tariffs across these 60 countries will be negotiated pretty quickly, including the Canadian situation you made details on. Let's take the Canadian situation, which we've been talking about. If you combine those economies, I'm not saying buying the country, but if you combine the economies, which seems impossible to do given the rhetoric and what's going on right now, but the truth is, the signal is it would be much stronger against China if there were no tariffs between Canada and the United States and they had a common currency and they protected the northern border, not the 49th parallel. Now, the Canadians know that's worth it because 75% of their output has been sold to the United States for over 120 years. 17 states call Canada the #1 trading partner. 28 states, in addition to those 17, #2 trading partners Canada. So it'd be economic suicide not to work this out. The obvious answer is to remove all tariffs, and that will happen, my guess is, right after the election when the Canadians make their choice about who they want to lead them. That person will fly to Washington immediately and start negotiations, which I would call NAFTA 3. But right now, that's not happening because Carney's trying to use this whole Trump issue as fulcrum to try and distract Canadians away from the facts that he wiped out the country. Trump has a 4-year mandate. At least 2 of them are in a majority situation. If he's going to do all this volatile stuff, which he's doing right now, he's got to do it now, because he may not have a majority mandate after the midterms. So that's why you're getting such an accelerated pace of policy.
Well, sorry to jump around quite a bit there, and you missed some of it. It would be a good thing for you to go find this clip and watch all of it if you have the time. 10 minutes is no big deal, but it's kind of a long clip to add into this show already. But, you know, he was covering a lot of different things and pointing out the fact that this is a negotiation, that Trump has a mandate. He has a short schedule. I just want to go a little bit into that right now because everybody's like, well, why is he moving so fast? Why is he doing all this right now? Well, the key is that he has to do it right now. Not only, so Kevin O'Leary talked about the fact that he only has a couple years before the midterms, but not only that, he doesn't want a negative economy to impact the midterm voting, right? So this, not only does he not have 2 years, he basically has 1 year before people need to, start seeing a positive upswing in the markets and in the economy before this affects those elections. And if he wants to have this kind of control and not be impeached every 5 seconds if they get in control of the House, then he needs to move quickly and make this happen. So it's very, very important that he gets moving very fast. And the other important thing that Kevin O'Leary talked about is the natural correction of the market. This is something that I've thought about as potentially part of the reason why Donald Trump wanted to push this so quickly, is because the market was going to make a correction. Okay, it needed to. And maybe Donald Trump thought, well, it's better that it happens now than, again, when it gets closer to the midterms, and be done in a controlled fashion as well, than, to be done later on when it's out of control and just happens naturally. So there's a couple different factors that I've thought about as well. It's hard to really know what the market would do without interference, but we do know that it was overvalued and that a natural correction, like Kevin O'Leary said, happens every 18 months, and it would have been due to happen right around the midterms, which is the last thing Donald Trump needs. And, I've also said about the fact that Americans have a historically short-term memory. And if he makes this happen now, the pain will not be felt at the midterms if he does it now, because people only remember the last 3 to 6 months. So if he makes, as long as it corrects and he makes progress and it looks good a year from now, then nobody will remember that this even happened. Of course, the media is not going to even want to talk about it if something worked. So better to get on it now. Now, we didn't hear the part where the reporter was asking him what, the president should do. And Kevin O'Leary said, what other tools would you want him to do to negotiate with these countries? And she's like, well, I'm not the president. I don't know. So, of course, everybody's an expert until you get put on the spot and have to give a common sense, smart answer. And then all of a sudden they don't know anything. They're just asking questions. Right. We got you. Anyways, this last clip I want to get into, it goes back to the guy on the boardwalk that was questioned that I just gave a clip of on the opening, talking about how the tariffs don't affect him. We're going to go to that, and then we'll talk about that.
They go into effect today. What do you think about the Trump tariffs?
Doesn't affect me.
Why not?
I'm pro-Trump, but don't affect me.
Well, what do you think about it? Tell me your opinion on how he's going about it. What do you think?
Dominance, baby. Greatest country in the world.
And so I think this is going to be the mentality of most middle, lower class Americans, is that, yeah, they may see some fluctuations in prices at the store. I think that's really going to be kept to a minimum. I mean, you've already seen these stories about iPhones, right? They're like, oh, it's going to raise the prices to $2,000. And then another article today says, oh, Apple's found another way to reduce prices or to eliminate these prices or stop the prices from going so high. So, and that's the great thing about capitalism and free markets, is the fact that these companies will find innovative ways to stay competitive. And you're going to see these shuffling, whether they, start moving things from factory to factory. Big companies diversify, just like people diversify their money when they're investing. And the more money you have, the more diversified you get, because it protects you against a downfall in any single market. Big corporations do the same thing. They know that things can change, especially, with changes in leadership in different countries. And they have to be prepared to make quick changes in order to stay competitive across the world. And I think that's what Apple's going to do. That's what you're going to see, in other areas as well. But going back to talking about the general middle lower class citizen, they don't have money in the stock markets. They really don't care what the Dow Jones does. They don't care what the S&P 500 says. Okay, 40% of Americans don't have any money in the stock market. Okay, and you've got to figure at least another 20% barely have anything. So, when you're talking about the markets and that being an indicator of the economy as a whole, it really isn't true. And it's not going to be seen by that 60%, we'll say, of Americans who have very little interest in the market. They're not personally invested. That's the guy on the boardwalk who says, I don't really care. I don't have any money in there anyways. What difference does it make to me what the stock market does? I just care about what the prices are in the store. I care whether I can get a job to support my family, put a roof over their head. That's what I care about. And if Donald Trump is successful in bringing some of these businesses and jobs back to the United States, that's where those 60% of people are going to care about. And in reality, this is actually kind of a left-leaning liberal viewpoint to try to use these, to worry about those citizens at the bottom, or at least what they claim. Of course, I don't believe them. They would rather the people in the lower class be stuck, being dependent on the government, because that gives the government the power to force these people to do what they want, which is what the left loves. But they proclaim to want to help these people. And so you'd think that they would, be on the side of bringing back jobs for the lower class, lower middle class, middle class citizens, to be able to support their family and maybe to have the potential to invest in a strong stock market in the future. And just to close, I'm going to throw in this little clip of the market today, which kind of stabilized and went into the green for a little bit anyways.
Well, the commercial break happened, and now the Dow is in a little bit of a positive territory. So a little bit of volatility as people price in some of the discussions this morning, as the White House says over 50 countries have contacted the White House looking to negotiate or at least discuss tariffs, and then the president having that meeting with Netanyahu today at 2 o'clock, a press conference at 2:30 during Sandra's show.
Yeah, and the president put out a statement that he had just gotten off the phone with the Japanese prime minister, that they were having productive conversations, and now just hitting, which seems to be when the markets turned around here, was that the EU is talking with the United States amid this tariff battle. And the statement from the EU is, we are ready to discuss with the U.S., but solutions need to be mutual advantage. So what you're getting is the sense that they're coming to
There's
the table.
communications,
The
right.
negotiations are happening.
Sure.
And that's when we saw the turnarounds, the Dow at 526 for now.
Okay, there we go.
So interesting to see. Obviously, the markets are impacted by news. They are impacted by, kind of the word on the street, what's happening, what they think's going to happen. It happens very quickly. There's also theory that I've heard, and it's not really that far-fetched, that there's a lot of AI being used in stock trading these days because it's very, very fast. It can read through news articles and take reports quickly and interpret them and make trades faster than any human can. And so if you've got that little edge in the markets, you can take advantage of very volatile situations like this. And, as countries come to the table and start making talks about how they can, make mutually advantageous deals, you're going to see stabilizing in the market. I do think that we're probably in for a little bit more downturn tomorrow. It's all going to depend on how these negotiations work out. We could see wild swings day to day, hour to hour even. But I think that ultimately the biggest hit has already happened. I think that the market will start to stabilize. And as these negotiations turn to the positive, we're going to start seeing an upswing back to a baseline where we can build and make America great and make our economy strong once again. Anyways, thanks for joining for today's episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment below, and come back for the next time. We'll have more episodes to come. Some shorts will be floating around as well. Thanks for joining. Don't forget to go out and volunteer for something meaningful. And as always, go out and spark the conversation.